leave. No, I'm kidding. I need a gavel. Hello, and welcome to beautiful Aiken, South Carolina. So glad you could all come today. And I think we're not all here. We're missing some people, but that's okay, because we're not going to vote, I don't think. So yes, welcome, and let's hear from Avery, our point of contact from the Department of Energy.
Jumping right in. Avery Hammett, DOE. I just have a few things for you tonight. On April 5th and 6th, the Savannah River site hosted the annual SRS Ultimate Turkey Hunt, which is held in conjunction with the National Wild Turkey Federation and the U.S. Forest Service, Savannah River. And we had, the hunt is for wounded warriors and mobility impaired hunters. We had 24 hunters from 6 states, and they took a total of 20 turkeys, which was down a little bit from last year, but we had rain this year, so it affected the hunt. But all the hunters were escorted by badged site personnel who volunteered to come and do that. So that was a big success. And the next two are both items that you heard about from the manager's update at the full board last month, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update on them. The groundwater treatment in P area is about to get underway. They're doing site prep right now, and construction will begin at the end of May and last for about 6 to 9 months. And this is the one Mr. Budney explained a little bit about, the VOCs in the groundwater, and they're building an underground wall of permeable zero-valent iron, which is injected into the subsurface with, it's suspended in a food-grade gel, and then the gel degrades and dissipates, and the iron is left there, and then the groundwater traveling through the iron is treated for the VOCs. So it's a pretty neat technology, and something that our regulators, the Environmental Protection Agency and South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control have been very supportive of this. So that's about to get underway. The site prep is, like I said, is going on now, and construction will begin in May. Of the actual injection will begin in May. And then the last item is another one that Mr. Budney talked about, the silver chloride injection, which is also used to treat groundwater out in F&H areas. And this is to treat radioactive iodine-129, which is in the groundwater. And the silver chloride is in suspension, and it's injected into the groundwater. And again, the same principle: as the groundwater travels through the silver chloride, the iodine is captured by the silver chloride molecules and comes out on the other side of it. The groundwater is cleaner. So that campaign is 80% complete. I believe it was in the 50s% complete at the CABME, at the full board. And we're at 80% now and expect to conclude the week of May 6th. So that was all I had. Any questions? You don't have to put the card up, it's okay.
Narendra Malik, I have a twofold question. One is about this treatment in the groundwater in the P area.
Mm-hmm.
How much BOC will be captured in the amount of how many pounds? And how do you manage to dispose of that sludge or whatever in exchange you use for capturing BOC?
I am not sure about the quantity. I'll have to get you an answer on that, but there is no sludge or anything, because nothing is above ground. Everything happens below the surface, and nothing will be brought to the surface as part. It all just happens passively.
So where does the BOC stays then?
It degrades from the iron, from contact, coming into contact with the iron.
About silver chloride treatment, once again, iodine captured, how much is it and how do you dispose it off?
Again, I'm not sure of the quantity. I'll have to get you information on that. Michael, do you have an answer on that?
Mike McCloskey, I think I have enough of an answer. There isn't a quantity amount. What happens with the silver chloride is that the silver chloride reacts with the long-lived radioactive iodine in the groundwater. It's never removed. What it does is it binds the iodine that's in solution and captures it, which entrains it in the ground matrix where it can decay, where it can safely decay. So instead of letting it continue to transport with the water into the surface water, down into the Savannah River and up into the water processing where it can get to people, it entraps it in the ground where it will stay until it can decay. I was just looking up because I figured somebody would ask the reaction. I can't remember whether it's the silver that bonds to the iodine, or whether it's, I believe it's the silver that bonds with the iodine, not the chloride, because they're both negative ions. So the silver will preferentially bond with the iodine when it comes into contact with it, and by injecting it into the groundwater, into where it's been strategically picked to go do, it'll diffuse a little bit locally, and it just is there waiting to trap the iodine as the groundwater flows very slowly through the matrix underground.
I believe the chloride will dissipate.
Well, yes, the chloride then is released into the environment. There's natural. The chlorides are not the hazard. The iodine is what we're trying to keep on the site.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question? The quantities, I couldn't tell you how quickly it is, but it's depleting, and we've noticed where we have applied it in the past a significant drop in radioactive iodine levels as a result of that.
So is it being monitored?
Oh yes,
Downstream?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And one other little point about the silver is that it's milled specifically for this project, and they it's milled in a way that increases the surface area so that more of the iodine can bind with it. So we have a subcontract with a company that does that for us.
Ongoing question with this one: do they have any video which shows how they inject it and how fine powder is this silver chloride?
I think there probably should be, and I do have a video I could bring next month of how the zero valent iron wall is built, because I saw that video last week. But let me check on one about the silver chloride also. Anybody else? Oh, Doug. Hey.
Doug Howard Cap. This is the first time this process has been done on this site.
The
correct?
P area,
right?
The iron for the VOCs, yes.
The silver chloride.
Yeah. Oh no, the silver chloride was a process that was created by scientists at SR. I think at SRNL, but in conjunction with the area completion groundwater guys, and that is the first time. We are the first site to use it, but this is not the first campaign. We've injected it. This is our second or third campaign. I feel like third, but
It's got to be at least our third.
yeah, I think it's the third. Okay, so it's the third campaign with this, but we are the first site to use it. So
Yeah, and that was my question. Was any other sites using it? Now, are there plans maybe for you all to make notice of this to the other sites that may possibly have the same problems?
Absolutely. That'll be right. There are technology sharing groups that headquarters champions that we participate with.
Mike McCloskey, Avery got it right. We share the technology between contractors as well as between federal agencies. There's a community of practice that where, yes, the innovative uses here at the site we share with other sites, as well as we get to hear what other sites have done. Now, many of these very specialized passive treatment systems, such as the silver chloride and this iron one, which I hadn't heard of before, they're aimed and targeted at a specific radionuclide or toxic chemical where you're injecting it. Like we use anaerobic, we go after some of the bacteria that'll eat bad things in the ground as well. They're tailored to specific hazards, so sometimes they're not necessarily deployable in other sites. But yes, at other sites and other contractors, they'll look at innovations at different sites to see if they can use it to reduce costs, clean up quicker, better levels for their own conditions.
For the Abraham at DOE, for the groundwater in P area, the site actually took a field trip to a site in Lexington that is already using this technology under, I believe, under DHEC's purview. I think that's how we heard about it, was through DHEC. So that is happening elsewhere in the state, but this is the first time on SRS for the VOC treatment with the iron. So, yes, ma'am.
Betty Cook Cab. I was just wondering, in the P area where you're talking about treating the water, is that water contained in that one area, or does it flow in other places?
No, it flows. The groundwater flows from the reactor area to the creek, which Joyce Branch?
3 miles.
I don't
Upper 3 runs. It flows into a creek, which would then eventually flow into the Savannah River. So the groundwater outcrops, and there's actually a ravine sort of behind there where you can see the groundwater outcropping. But the treatment is within the P area, and groundwater moves very, very slowly. It's not racing through, like a river, but it very slowly moves through the subsurface and moves, on to the creek and then down to the river. So that's why, we're taking this early action to treat this groundwater before, and so it'll move through the barrier, this reactive barrier, before it outcrops into the stream. So.
Thank you. I think that answered my question. I was just
Right. Any other questions?
I think we're good, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on. We have these things on the list, but I'm going to take a short moment to discuss our priority list that 3 of us have. Are there more over there that he printed?
There may have been. Let me see.
Okay.
If not, they can use mine.
Yeah, we can read one.
All right, we will get some from the other committee meeting because I didn't bother to make one of these, and Tom did, so we're going to thank him for his wisdom. So at the full board meeting last month, we decided to table writing the integrated priority list until the May full board meeting so that each committee could discuss the priority list at their committee meeting. At Tom's meeting, which was Strategic and Legacy Management earlier today, we talked about it and decided to strike numbers 6 and 7 from this list because the security is already going to be funded because that's MinSafe. Yes?
Mike McCloskey, DOE. I talked to him after the meeting. He'll probably leave just the security. It's okay to leave increased security, the fact that security is important to the cab. What I clarified with them was an understanding that getting too much into the details of it isn't going to add any value from what the cab is trying to communicate to the department. So even if it's covered in the MinSafe, letting the Department of Energy know that security, whether it's cybersecurity, physical security, or whatever, is important. I believe he's probably going to leave an item on, but he's just not going to get into, and adequately fund the expanding cybersecurity mission. That you're starting to get into detail at that point.
Okay.
So again, the cab can write anything they want to, and they can delete anything they want to. I was just giving him some guidance from my personal opinion, not telling him what he could and couldn't write.
Okay, and so in that case, I guess they decide to keep 6, but cut the part about cybersecurity, and they decided to get rid of number 7 because it seemed, in my words, self-serving and unnecessary because we have no danger of having our budget cut. Allegedly. Allegedly. Which leaves numbers 1 through 5 plus the annotated 6. Does anybody have any other feedback on this? They talked about putting PILT in there in the other committee, and I am inclined to agree with that, but I'm open to hearing your opinion, narrator.
Well, Narendra Malik, I've been always interested in infrastructure improvement, and I just talked to Avery about getting some information about the drinking water. The supply system at SRS, I believe, is very old. It may be breaking, so it needs improvement. And I'm going to talk to waste management point of contacts about some infrastructure in F-tank farm and H-tank farm about chromate cooling system. There may be some other issues, but these are two very close to me, and I'll talk to the committee members if they will have another ideas. So we will be discussing about infrastructure in waste management, and I think we'll be talking about infrastructure in your committee too.
Joyce Underwood, Cab, I agree that infrastructure is definitely high up on the priority list, so we can talk about moving it or expanding on it. Anybody else have any thoughts? Oh, here you go.
Narendra Malik, I think about 235F risk reduction. We had a very good presentation at the last full board meeting by the nuclear materials people and DD group. I think Charles Hilton and I are submitting a recommendation for accelerated process so that we can have all the paperwork done instead of waiting till 2040 for the completion of the facility. So we are going to see how DOE will react to that.
Am I going to put you on the spot if I ask for your input on this?
It would help if I knew what we were talking about.
The priority list.
Oh, the IPL list?
Yeah. The priority list.
I think the Gil Allensworth cab, 235F falls into both. Are we putting that completely on nuclear materials?
Nuclear materials.
Completely? So it's completely off of this spoke?
So, Mike McCloskey, DOE, Gil, to answer your question, any of the committees can really talk, like this committee, although the previous committee dealt with and is putting together the priority list, any committee can deliberate upon the draft that are put together just to talk amongst themselves. They're not going to change the document, but it'll give members serving on this committee the ability to take other members' feedback and stick it when the group re-meets again. You can talk about 235F here on this committee as well, and members that serve on this committee and the nuclear materials is going to, at the next week's meeting, are going to specifically look at the information that the department gave, because we were seeking feedback from the CAB on the proposal and whether we're going to remove everything from inside the facility or whether we should stop, mitigate the risk to the workers, and move forward. And just conceptually, how does the CAB feel or react to that? And we'll have a more detailed discussion than at the CAB what we had at Augusta at the last time at the full board meeting. So you can talk about that here too. Just that the recommendation, I think, any feedback will come from the Nuclear Materials Committee.
Okay.
That's what I would prefer,
So
just to keep the line straight.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying that. So staying in the scope of the IPL letter, the IPL list, from an FD&SR. Avery, smack me if I'm out of line.
No problem.
I mean, I think the biggest thing when I think of facilities, this committee is I would hope that this committee would hammer away at infrastructure, because without the infrastructure improvement, I don't think we're going to be able to get much done with disposition and site remediation. Let's see, I'm looking around the table. I know we have some people. If I say I'm going back a little bit in my memory banks to when Jack Craig was the site manager. I mean, he was literally pounding the pavement, saying we need our pavement upgraded. Those are the type of things that if we don't have that, who was it? It was someone at the last full board meeting said something about our roads built on sand, and I can't remember the exact wording, but it was really worried about. I mean, hauling trucks across the site is going to continue to be a problem. So I would, from this committee, you're putting me on the spot. Infrastructure is a huge part, but I'm going to say that to every committee. And then I think even though 235 doesn't fall under your purview, since it's been kind of pushed around, I still think 235 is a really big deal. This list that we have, did you bring us?
No, this is from Tom's committee.
Tom left it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I've been working on this a little bit, and in preparation for the full CAB meeting in Savannah, and for complete transparency, this was, I think this is a little too detailed. I would like to see and this will be talked about at the full CAB meeting in Savannah. Just my personal, I want to cut it down to four priorities. 4 priorities. Now, I mean, that's Gil Allensworth. I mean, I'm just a member of the CAB saying I would like to see it cut down to 4, and I'd like it to be more simplified. As I look back at last year and what we accomplished as a CAB, this was, and what it specifically, and this from my role as chairman, this was the first thing I undertook as chair. And as I look back at this, I think it got a little out of hand as I read it. Because I mean, as I'm looking at this, Joyce, if I take this away and say I'm not a CAB member and I'm the DOE peer person reading this, what in the world is their priority? Oh my goodness, this is so muddled. So we have 7 things and 3 subpoints and all these. So what I would like to see us do is, and since we're having this conversation kind of in what Michael kind of prefaced, I really appreciate, liquid waste, I know this is not a FD&SR, but liquid waste is going to be number 1. I mean, that's going to be number 1 for the full CAB. I mean, I can't imagine that moving. Now we can start talking about the other things. From a facilities disposition, I think 235F fits in well for y'all, even though it's a nuclear materials, it's under nuclear materials for the recommendation. And then we need to look at the infrastructure improvement across, and I like across all PBSs, because I like the CAB, me personally, I like the CABs getting that granular and saying this is what we want. We want to see it in PBSs, not just the site, specifically infrastructure on the PBS level. I apologize, I was a little late this meeting, but you're getting my stream of consciousness. So thanks.
Joyce Underwood, CAB. I like the idea of getting it down to 4. I will say that in the other committee meeting, they had this idea of the overarching goal, which was basically going to touch on whatever else was in the numbered list. So I like that idea. They talked about putting PILT in there. I like that idea. Zach liked that idea. As much as he could like it.
Sorry to jump ahead of you, Doug. Actually, in my workup of it, and my laptop's in the truck. I probably could go pull it up. In the mock-up that I did, and again, of course, it's going to be completely up to the CAB, the full board. I mentioned PILT in the actual letter, but I don't list it as one of the priorities, if that makes sense. So PILT is extremely important. However, thinking about this letter, and this I'll sound like a broken record in Savannah. I will say we have to, with what the IPL, the integrated priority list, is that correct?
Yes.
Integrated priority list. It's a priority list. It's not a wish list. It's not a list of these are the things we want done. It's a priority list. So let's make it a priority list. Does that mean there's things on here that is not going to be included that we want done? Absolutely. But from my understanding, and from John Lopez when he comes and gives us, strategic and legacy management, when he comes and gives us budget updates, Savannah River Department of Energy takes this letter from the CAB and says, this is what our citizenry around SRS is asking for, Congress, senators, congressmen. This is what our people are telling us to ask for. Well, if they're taking this, it's a muddled, oh my goodness, if I'm Senator Graham reading this going, well, what do they want? And so if we can make it bing, 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 it's easier for DOE to use what we've given them, take them as a tool. Yes. I fiercely want PILT funded. I'm huge about our local community. I'm huge about Allendale and Barnwell County and Aiken County. And if they don't get those funds, well, Aiken County's got its own issues, but compared to Barnwell, and Allendale counties, it's a huge issue for those counties. Not to mention what DOE did in the 50s or 40s or whenever it was to say, well, this is payment in lieu of us paying you, taxes. So it's kind of important. But how I viewed it, Joyce, was priorities are the priorities, and then mention PILT in the letter without putting in the priorities. Does that mean the CAB's going to agree with what I said? I don't know. Does that mean that someone's going to say, let's make a fifth priority? I don't know. But that's kind of my thought.
Let's let Doug and then, is that okay? Okay.
Doug Howard, CAB. And Gil, what I hear you saying is just have 4 hot priorities on the list.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Okay, and I think you're right on in that because early in my days in the military, they taught us how to put the bottom line up front on anything that is pretty much written. And I think when you put more than, the number of priorities that we have, it kind of gets everybody kind of lost in the translation in a way that what really are their priorities. And I think if we have 4 really hot priorities, I think it's going to draw more attention than having a bunch of priorities listed there. And I think both of us know, Gil, one of the first all-chairs meeting that I went to, when I went down for breakfast that morning and talked to one of Van White's staff members, first thing out of his mouth was infrastructure. And I think that is something we definitely need to stay on top of and make sure that it's heard loudly. And I think we, Gil, also need to make sure, and I think our chairs meeting is also highlighting infrastructure, because without it, you have nothing, and it's steadily falling apart as we speak. So yeah, I agree with just having 4 real hot priorities.
No pun intended.
No pun intended.
Narendra Malik, CAB, I think Zach discussed about the funding for the counties. I don't know how detailed he has gone into that in the previous meeting.
Funding for the PILT?
Yeah.
Oh, Mike?
No, Zach.
Zach talked
From
about
DOE.
it in the previous?
Yes, he did talk about that.
Okay.
I don't know much detail, but I just want to bring to your attention that he did talk about that.
I know, they told us at the full board meeting, I don't know who it was, but PILT's important to this. While it may not have been funded in the president's budget, to Department of Energy, Savannah River, it's very important. So, and it's been funded. It's been funded before. Going off script here a little bit, Joyce, and maybe it's a question for Avery. is the Applied Research Center, would that fall, that's not within you at all, right? I mean, it's getting news today. I mean, the Standard ran a story on the ARC today.
Yeah, that's not, I don't know.
That's the lab, right?
The Applied Research Center?
Is that what it is, the ARC, or is it?
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, there's a story in the Standard about it today. Or maybe it's coming out tomorrow and it's online already.
I know SRNL has
Yeah.
But it's a
labs
county
there, but I'm not sure.
It's the in the president's budget. I mean, I'm getting into the weeds. I'm taking us off track. It's a $50 million is in the president's budget for the USC Aiken thing.
Mike McCloskey, Stevie,
that's
you're talking
yeah.
about the AMC.
Sorry.
I forget what it is.
Advanced manufacturing.
Yeah, collaboration.
Six
is it?
letters.
Alphabet
Collaboration.
Yeah, advanced manufufacturing collaboration, I believe,
Yep.
is what it's called. No, that is different. That is not the ARC.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, I messed that one up. But so, that's. I mean, I don't know how it's being funded, but that's $50 million most likely getting pulled from somewhere.
Well, let me ask you this, because I'm fully in agreement that 4 is a good number, and maybe PILT doesn't need to be in the 4 directly, but how, and this is open to anybody in the room that knows the answer to this question, how might we as a CAB advocate for that? Does that fall under this, for PILT, does that fall under the scope of any particular committee? Is that a thing that we could do? Thoughts?
That would be,
I don't know.
it would be SNLM.
Yeah, that's the only thing I could do.
Mike McCloskey, Stevie, we'll have to look at that because previously the AMC would have fallen under the purview of nuclear materials when the lab SRNL was under nuclear materials. Since they became their own project office, we've had internal discussions of, okay, which committee will have the primary, be the primary working group for issues pertaining to the national lab. And I believe our preliminary discussions were it'll probably still fall under nuclear materials, but I have not been able to get Tony Polk engaged in having those discussions for a final decision. Is that the way, am I remembering it correctly, James?
Yeah, that's accurate for AMC
Okay.
and SRL.
And AMC was in a different bin when it was conceptual, and they were trying to explore the possibility of it. Our integration group was actually championing a lot of that in the formulation stages, but now that it's out and a working initiative, it would be associated with the national lab.
Well, what about PILT?
Yeah.
What committee would
So-
PILT fall underneath?
Where's it
In
been
terms of providing advice or
Input, yes.
recommendation to the department, I wouldn't recommend taking it on as like a committee work plan item. I would say that the IPL is your best and most proactive and productive shot at commenting on PILT to the department and to the government as a whole.
Let me, Mike McCloskey, if next year you guys wanted to do something, because I'm not hearing a specific issue that you wanted to work on with PILT other than putting it, whether you should put it in a priority list. Putting it in the priority list the way you're working now is fine. If you actually wanted to have something in the work plan to go do something related to PILT, much like we did last year with the retirement, we could take that offline. You could have a specific requested change and let DOE figure out, okay, which committee do we formulate a separate committee
Gotcha.
for it, or you can just pose it to DOE as a challenge in the next work plan development of, okay, we'd like to do X if DOE agrees you'd like advice from us on this topic, and we'll figure out which committee to give it to as a work list item based on the workload that each committee has. How's that sound for a proposal, Gil?
I don't like it.
Oh,
I don't want
Doggone it.
another committee.
Pardon? Oh, I didn't say you had to have another committee. I gave you the off-ramp was next year when we do the work plan,
Yeah, no.
suggest it and then let DOE figure out which committee we'll give it to based on the workload that
And,
each committee has.
Me being completely independent and open-minded, PILT's a political boondoggle. I mean that's what I think of it, and so I think that I know Mike's going to comment on it, but I mean it's a
No.
DOE thing.
No, I'm not.
We
Mike-
can sit back and talk about it, till we're blue in the face. I think Savannah Riverside DOE has proven that they care about it for 2 years. And if it's not funded, I think the leadership there figures out how to get it paid. And I guess we could dig in and do a recommendation through some committee or create a ad hoc committee or whatever. But yeah.
So
I think
no,
that
Mike
sorry, go
McCloskey,
ahead.
I'm not going to comment on it specifically, but I was going to share with you what was said in the last committee. Zach neither advocated for or against including in the priority list because that's your determination to make, but what he shared with the CAB was that the department finds value. If the CAB thinks that PILT is important, the department finds value in that because we formulate the budgets, and if the community says PILT's important, that does add value and it does impact the process as we do budget formulation. So it's up to you whether you feel it's an item worth noting, but he did say that there was value in having your opinion on it.
That's where I'm coming from. I mean, if it being mentioned in the body of the letter and not in the bullets is sufficient, then I think that's fine. But I do think that, you know, those of us that feel strongly about that on the committee want everybody in the whole world to know we feel strongly about it.
I understand.
So
I understand, and I mean that's a debate for the full board, and I'm sure that I'm not sure. I anticipate that debate to be had, and I respect both sides of the argument because I see both sides of the argument. I'm a staunch believer in PILT being honored, and I'm also a staunch believer in saying these are our priorities. And when we break PILT down, I mean, I know we're in the wrong committee, but we're not. I mean, it's amazing how a couple $1 million between friends isn't any big deal. But I mean, it's percentage-wise, we're talking about a fractional percentage of the SRS EM budget, a fractional percentage. So we're not talking about a lot, but it's important. I mean, just because it's small doesn't mean it's not important. But
a fraction for them, but close to 40% for Barnwell County.
Whatever the number is, right? Exactly. But it's the tough thing. I mean, we're on the Citizens Advisory Board, and we've been selected by DOE to make some tough decisions. And when I look at this last year, whoever was the chairman and guided people through, I don't think forced any tough decisions. I think the chairman just said, "Hey, whatever, let's go with it." And the chairman, should have said, "No, this is a priority list, not a free-for-all." And that chairman did not do a good job. So I think this year that chairman needs to be much more focusing the CAB into, okay, let's have a fair debate and say what's our priorities and not list out 7, 8, 9, 10 priorities, because those subpoints are priorities too.
I think, Narendra Malik, I think Jim is going to revise this letter and he's going to send us again within a couple of days.
Who is?
Dave.
Tim French.
Tom.
Tom French. He's going to revise this,
He's going to revise this.
update it, and send us for another review.
Well, I don't want to. I mean, just me looking at it, I don't want committee chairman writing 4 different IPL letters, and then we have to come together. That's the only. That's just my thought right now.
Well, Joyce Underwood, CAB. I'm more or less in support of what Tom said in the last meeting, which was liquid waste, 235F, infrastructure, and increased security. And then PILT was, of course, mentioned. But those, I think, were his top priorities, were they not? It doesn't matter.
These are. I mean, and I understand the cybersecurity, and these are the discussions that it's good to have at committee meetings. But when we have the debate in full board, this is a committee meeting. It doesn't really matter. Do we really think if we don't put cybersecurity in the IPL list that DOE is not going to pay attention to cybersecurity?
They cut cybersecurity in the last meeting. They changed it to just support increased security across the site because cybersecurity was too micro, right?
See, that's fine. That's fine. But you know, my and I wasn't in that debate. I wasn't in that conversation. I don't know what was said. I apologize.
Oh no, you're fine.
Yeah, I had business that took me away from that committee meeting, and I hate it. But I mean, the full board, and I mean, maybe there's a really good point that I don't understand that I'm missing that committee's come up with. But for us to put security of a nuclear facility in the priority list, I think is pretty redundant in taking away one of our priorities. I mean, of course, security is of utmost importance. We have plutonium out there. So, I mean, for us to say as a CAB, that's one of our priorities, is that you secure the site, to me, that's just redundant and not necessary.
Well, let me, I guess, take this up. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So, Mike McCloskey, Davey, just to put it in context, when Joyce asked me, hey, geez, what can we do with this? It's not on the agenda, and can we discuss it? She made it clear she didn't want to have a discussion of a separate committee's priority list, but rather to go discuss the working document of what the previous committee was, to engender some discussion that could be brought back to the other committee, and I can't remember, what's the previous one?
Strategic.
Thank you, Strategic and Legacy. They have the primary responsibility for doing the priority list, and Joyce made it very clear to me, and why I agreed to a general discussion was just to prompt this. Your thoughts and opinions on what needs to be discussed at the full CAB is exactly the kind of discussion she wanted to engender here. So from the DDFO's perspective, and that's why I'm providing some clarity from the DDFO's perspective. I think this has been a very good discussion. It's a healthy discussion to help guide and provide input for the committee as it does its work, and the board as a whole when you deliberate the results.
Right. So, I mean, Joyce, if nuclear materials and waste management go similar to this next week, I'll be saying the exact same thing.
Well, I'll be there, so we'll see.
Or if I don't, you're going to have to check me in and get me checked out.
Here's your Cliff's Notes. Does
Nuclear
anybody?
materials will be way too busy next week.
Yeah, nuclear materials isn't going to have the opportunity really to go over the IPL that much. But waste management will.
My close personal friend Narinder here will make it happen. Does anybody?
Will you speak on what?
Sorry, did I laugh?
This is a very pleasant little meeting, guys. I'm real happy.
I can turn it real quick.
Don't. Does anybody else have anything else to add about the IPL, or shall we move forward? Bueller? No, seeing none. Okay. All right, so I'm doing this totally out of order because we have recommendations, number 59 and 359 and 360, and then we voted on 361 at the full board. And rather than discussing them and moving to close any of them at this time, I think that it would be best to wait on the response to 361 before doing anything about 359 because they're related. They're both dealing with pollinators. And we are getting a presentation in direct response to 360 was it next meeting or just further on?
September.
In
I think it's going to
September.
be in September.
So given that, I'm sorry?
Charleston.
That means in Charleston? Okay.
So given that information, I think it would behoove us to wait on the presentation before doing anything moving forward to close that one. So that's where we are with our recommendations, which leaves
Joyce,
us...
can you remind me about what's going on with 361 Pollinator Management Plan?
We voted on it at the board, and we're waiting.
We sent it out?
Yeah, we sent it.
We're working on the response.
Yeah.
Okay, so pending means we're awaiting response. Okay.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you don't understand it either.
No, I don't remember seeing it in open and pending status before, but that's fine. I mean, it's just I want to make sure I understand. So pending means awaiting response.
Pending means awaiting response. Once you get a response, it's open until you close it.
Okay.
But he said, oh gosh.
What is it if it's draft?
A draft.
Still under
Yeah, it's still
discussion?
draft. It's not in. Yeah.
It's the one that actually means what it means.
But a recommendation's a draft. It doesn't have a number yet.
Correct.
Okay, introduce yourself.
Yeah, so then I got you.
So now that we've discussed that, any questions, comments, concerns about that? Seeing none. We're going to talk about our handy dandy presentation that we had. Wasn't it awesome, guys? Does anybody
Yes,
have
it
any
was.
input? I'm going to let it sit for like 5 minutes so somebody needs to come up with a question. Did everybody get the handout?
Well, the biggest thing with that is, I'm a little. I mean, we asked the question about funding. I mean, is funding okay? I mean, because they're receiving, how much are they receiving? About $480,000 a year, roughly.
It's a little more than that, isn't it?
More. Is it more than that?
It was Mike McCloskey's DOE, as I recall, it was more than $1 million. So
More than $1 million,
we
my
could
bad.
get you the specific numbers. I'm talking off the top of my head, so I'm going from recollection. It was whatever DHEC had asked for. We looked the reason. This is going from my memory when I was the assistant manager for infrastructure environmental management. We looked at what they asked for, understood the organizational structure and how they were using it, and agreed to the funding and it's funded by a grant. So there's never been an issue with funding what DHEC wanted to go do because it's an independent check on
Right.
what the department's own monitoring system and monitoring activities discover.
Well, I'm getting a sense from DHEC that they're nervous about the grant. There's no reason they should be.
Mike McCloskey, I don't remember I don't remember that being a discussion at the full board meeting. I remember somebody
I don't-
raising a question on how they were funded and whether there was a concern. But I'll ask our staff to go look back in the transcript of the full board meeting if there was a concern that was raised by the DHEC representative when the discussion occurred. We'll share that with you. We'll
Okay,
pull that out for you.
Yeah, I don't remember. I walked away from that meeting having just a feeling in my stomach. And Joyce, you don't have to put your card up.
But
It's
I
your
want
co-
to.
it's your
It makes me
committee.
feel safe.
It's your committee. You can talk.
It's my security blanket. Joyce Underwood Cab. Okay, I have a question because I feel like this presentation was one of the ones that was like a necessary update. Is that correct?
Avery Hammett, DOE. This presentation was done at the request of DHEC.
Oh, so they wanted to come.
They wanted to come and present their data to you.
So why? Because we can't recommend to them, right?
This falls under the purview of the CAB as a vehicle to communicate the environmental compliance status of the Savannah River site, and getting DHEC's perspective on that is, I think, important. You would not be tasked with providing a recommendation to DHEC, but if there were something in the presentation that triggered something that you would like DOE to do,
Okay.
you could write a recommendation on that.
Right.
Otherwise, it's a sort of FYI.
Informative.
Yes.
This is DHEC saying, look what we did. We done good. More or less.
Right, and that SRS is doing well.
And that y'all done
and that
good. Look, we all did good.
And Motzi is typing, okay, the ESOP, the DHEC grant for the monitoring is roughly 1.8 million a year. So,
I was afraid to say over 2 because I didn't think it was
Yeah.
over 2.
that's the answer.
Okay, great.
So, did it get anybody's wheels turning in their brain?
I think DHEC does a great job year over year with this report. The thing that always gets me is that this report coincides with other information we get from DOE and EPA, correct, Avery? Does EPA, I mean,
Mike McCloskey, the EPA only provides us feedback, obviously, in the core team. What I'll say from the department's behalf is that we appreciate the feedback we get from DHEC through the activities funded by the grant, much like we do SREL. They're both independent of the site. They're looking at similar data. They're grabbing their own data, and when their feedback lines up with what we believe reality to be, that's where we see value. And if there's discrepancies or differences, that's what we look at very closely to understand, okay, well, why is SREL or why would DHEC see something differently than what we're getting from our own data? So we value them both as independent sources of perspectives on how the site's doing.
The thing, I guess what I was going for is the thing I always hear when we start seeing these numbers and we compare them, they're all so tight together. I mean, the findings, we talk. I know y'all don't within the department. You don't talk with people outside in Aiken and Augusta and Evans and Martinez. Everyone thinks there's like some nefarious cover-up of dramatic proportions going on behind the fences. And I mean the numbers are just spot on year over year over year over year over year. I understand the checks and balances. So but that's kind of when I sit back. I mean, where's is it Dave Avakis that always says who's responsible, and he asks about the taxpayer? I mean, it's like we do all these redundancies, and they always come out the same, which is great. But that's so. I'm always impressed with the report, and I guess being on the cab for 4 years, it's like, oh, here we go again with these reports. So,
Avery Hammett, DOE. One follow-up. DHEC's report is always behind ours, and they are committed to catching up to SRS's schedule. So it's possible that for our November ACER presentation, the sites report on the monitoring, that DHEC will be able to, on the spot at the time, give their perspective also. So then it will be a real-time comparison for you guys, which would make it easier. So that's Greg O'Quinn's goal. He's not sure if they're going to get there this year or if it'll take another year to catch up, but eventually we hope to have the two presentations on the same day, like a co-presentation basically, so that you can see real-time validation of our data. So
would it be like at the board meeting, the panel?
We've been looking at ways to get the panel discussion across some other committees. That would actually be a really good idea.
Because I liked it.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah,
that's a very good idea.
There's been a lot of positive feedback on the.
Mike McCloskey, we got a lot of positive feedback from the last full board meeting, and to the extent we can do future work along those lines or structure CAB work items along the lines that would facilitate the kind of panel discussions or the interactions, that was much better than just providing an informational presentation. We're going to look at how we can incorporate that way of doing business for other committees as well.
Is that a thing to bear in mind making the work plan next year?
Mike McCloskey, let us get back to you, because we're gonna try and incorporate that. We're gonna look and see how the rest of the work plan lends itself to those kinds of things, and to the extent possible, we're gonna try and make them as entertaining and value added for the CAB as the last one was. No promises on how well we'll deliver that, but we're looking at it.
Absolutely.
Well, I can tell you, entertainment, laser light show, smoke machines, those things draw my attention.
So you have seen the May agenda.
No, that's the full board. That's the all chair. That's the site specific. Everybody. We got a bigger budget for that, right?
We'll leave the fireworks off.
Yeah, fireworks was a safety hazard, but the lasers.
Yeah, and lasers.
Disco ball.
Oh. There we go. Disco
all right,
ball.
get back on topic.
I'll bring the bread, you bring the circuses, right? No? Never mind. It's a Roman thing. So, does anybody have anything else about our handy dandy DHEC presentation, or shall we open for public comment?
Frederica, you want to do some public comment?
Go get Trilby. She's got a lot to say. Well, seeing no public comments, I'm looking so forward to seeing you all in May, because we're going to have a D&D presentation. Yay! Now you can all go.
Meeting adjourned?
Meeting adjourned. You can leave.